Okay, you can hear me just about here. Great. Um, yeah, I have so many friends in this room. That's great because while I've done a lot of things, including street performance and circus, I've not given a talk at a tech convention. And this is a start. And for those of you who haven't met me, thanks for being here. I'm excited to meet you. Okay, you've heard the name of my talk several times. I did not put everything I do on this slide because that would be crazy. I'm Claire. I have a card that in tiny font does tell you a lot of what I do and then has a QR code on it. I can hand that to anyone interested after this. I also have, just for this event, I'm revealing that I do have a chip in my hand. We can play that game at any point later, but try not to bottleneck right after this. We'll hang out all weekend. Yeah, and right after a talk, people gather. You'll see me. I'm visible. We'll talk. Please do come talk to me. Okay. So what this talk is about, like I think a lot of tech talks, it comes from an info dump that I do compulsively to my friends all of the time. And so it's a combination of my special interest and passion and lifelong experience, but this has tried to distill it into the impact of specifically hobby laser cutters in the last, since about 2017, I would say. And then just that it's unrecognized typically and invisible in tech space, even though I'm sure as individuals you all try and care very much that women and queers are genius, and we should just say that all the time. And this is a way I show that is through hobby laser cutting. What this is not about is this is my one excuse doing this talk to not do something that's not femme or earring related. I'm sure you want to do many other things with a laser, and I get asked that all the time, but I get to talk about what I want to talk about here. And then, okay, so comparing lasers and 3D printers. I'm gonna talk about that a bit. Laser cutters and 3D printers being so closely culturally associated is something that I find deeply annoying. And it doesn't really make sense to me because if you try to break it down as to why, maybe we go about it logically, right? If it's because they're both on a gantry and they're kind of small scale manufacturing tools, then so are die cutters, vinyl cutters. So are CNC routers. So are many other small scale automated machines. So there's something about laser cutters and 3D printers, right, that they're just constantly conflated. If it's because of what they make and how it looks, well, one of them is additive completely, and one of them is subtractive completely. One of them uses spools of filaments, the other one only flat sheets. They're quite different, actually. In look, I can see how sometimes things look similar, but so does metal and clay. So does like thread and wire sometimes. Okay, so I think that a huge part of why they're so heavily conflated is just simply cultural with background. And I think that the fact this is still going contributes to massive gatekeeping around what is considered tech and what is considered craft. I think I'm speaking to an audience that really gets this. But I come from a background of crafting in a million mediums, running a business, making and selling things that I made at Comic-Cons and sci-fi fantasy conventions, and I did this for over a decade. And so my entire life I've kind of been working with my hands and making things. And I didn't even do that on purpose. I just had access to craft supplies. I was lucky in that way. And so I've worked with jewelry, clay, feathers, beading, felt, fur, wire, hot glue, and I use a whole lot of different tools to do this. Entertainingly, for what I look like, I don't make clothing and I'm not good at textiles. A whole lot of women are. I'm not one of them. So I think this is part of why I get frustrated that laser cutters and 3D printers are just said in the same breath. And those of us that have a foot in both worlds, if we're going to break it up into within side of tech and outside of tech and that gate that's in between there, those of us that have a foot in both are like, of course this doesn't make sense. I assume that's a lot of you, but I find from both sides, in a lot of the tech space, it's just like, well, there's manufacturing and engineering and industrial machines, and that's its own fancy thing. And then especially outside of tech, in my more spaces where people don't consider themselves technical, laser cutting and 3D printing are just the tools that they aren't smart enough or good enough to do yet, and they want to learn. I run into this nigh constantly. I know this also from a perspective of survival. At Comic-Cons, when I was selling things I made, when I made clay horns, they were cute. If somebody liked how they looked on them, great, I could sell a pair of clay horns. Same with things I made with feathers or hot glue. When I made laser cut jewelry, instead of using charms I found, right? And I even had a sign that said, laser cut by robots, assembled by hand, but oh my God, robots. That gave a clout, a power that sold that jewelry to help me survive, and I utilized that all of the time. So that's part of why I'm intimately aware of this divide, and why it means a lot to me that these tools are somehow pedestalized in that way. So part of why this talk is about hobby laser cutting is because the movement of hobby laser cutting is destroying that line step by step by step in a lot of ways. And I've been watching this because I've been laser cutting for a long time. When the first hobby laser cutter happened, I went, oh my fucking God, this changes everything about this passion I have. Okay. Hobby laser cutters are marketed to and this is like nearly a direct quote by the person who runs Glowforge. They partnered with Joann's and they are marketing to the scrapbooking market. And I do not, especially to this audience or to me, really want to make a monolith or a bucket to throw everything into. But there is, with this kind of gatekeeping thing, a really big pseudo-binary. And when I say soccer moms, I'm just using a huge trope that should not exist to point at a market and an audience that is typically invisible and unrecognized in more maker and technical space. And our culture generally on every side would say, yeah, that person's not an engineer, right? So I mean TikTok kids, I mean my peers at Comic-Cons and sci-fi fantasy conventions. I mean a massive swath of people in this quote. I think you get it. But really, there is inside of this quote a phenomenon of women all across America who have time because they're at home for one reason or another, and they have access to enough money to buy a laser cutter, sometimes to do a side income, sometimes as a hobby, and they're buying a laser cutter and they have the time to play with it. And this I know because I'm in a number of Facebook groups with this audience, including Acrylic Obsessed. So that tiny, tiny font says 28.2 thousand members. This is one Facebook group of many. This group has existed for only a few years. And when I checked it yesterday, it said 28.1 thousand members. I use a keyword website called eRank. I really love it. It'll give you statistics for different marketplaces. And so on Etsy, in one day, if you look up weird earrings, that is the average number of searches for that exact term is 1,792 people search that on just Etsy every single day as of 2 days ago. And then average clicks is higher than that on listings that use those terms. And so it's 106% throughput.
How does it be 106?
Because the listings that use the term weird earrings are being clicked on by some people who didn't search for that term. Yeah. So it's over 100% success on weird earrings. And the weird earrings phenomenon is entirely laser cut run for the most part. There are people putting little toys, tiny flashlights, and gummy worms onto earrings, and that's also very cool. But this is mostly, and I'll give you pictures later, laser cut jewelry by hobby laser cutters by mostly women and queer folks and young folks at home. Okay. So this is my passion. I've given you a huge idea of what that is. But yeah, femmes and queers have very quickly invented incredible new laser cutting techniques. It is now normal as of, so say hobby laser cutters have been around for what, 7-ish years? And it took 3 or 4 years for them to catch on. So let's say we've got like 4 or 5 years of really active things going on in the community, really figuring things out. It is now standard to join a hobby laser cutting group, and you will very quickly not only buy a laser cutter, you will buy a sublimation printer to be printing on and creating your own acrylic sheets. I'm only seeing this in hobby laser cutting with femmes and queers across America, kind of in a cottage industry way. There's also, and this matters to me a lot because I've been making laser cut jewelry for over a decade, and I have been the most creative person with it that I know, and I am obsessed with all the different materials, and this immediately solved for things that I could not solve in a decade. This phenomenon, this movement, including there is now durable, cuttable sheet adhesive that you can peel one side off, put it onto the back of your acrylic sheet, cut through the entire thing, and put teeny tiny pieces together with the adhesive already stuck to the acrylic. That's insane. That's insane to me. Like, I would have given a pinky to do that in 2012. Like, this is all happening at breakneck speed, and it's moving in quickly in large part, I believe, because I think femmes and queers really know and have been taught since birth how to share and create content that is quality, listen to each other, and quickly learn from each other. I see this in these groups. I see this in the phenomenon generally. I'm biased, and this is just my opinion. I don't have data to back it up, but I really think this is a thing. And then truly an entire cottage industry has popped up of people starting to sell like acrylic that they are sourcing from China, and they're being meticulous and detail oriented about it, and they're finding these incredible acrylic sheets that most people have not really found. They're importing those. They're also making their own printed acrylic sheets, and then they're opening shops in their garage, and within a year or two it's grown to an entire massive business. There's more than one of these. They're happening everywhere. They're happening on Etsy. And that has affected industrial plastic suppliers. I didn't have time to make this slide, but a slide I would make is 2 different listings. One on one of these boutique acrylic sites that is beautiful, descriptive, evocative, and then a screenshot, I didn't take them back 8 years ago, of like Johnson's Plastics listings. And then one of those now. They are being affected. They're like, oh no, this is so much better, right? So this is having ripples across the entire industrial industry. And this talk I am giving because I don't think anyone sees it like I do, or they're not talking about it that I've seen. Okay. I'm angry. I've alluded to this throughout this talk. If you know me at all, you know this. Yeah, okay, so yes, we get it. Yes, no one's trying to be exclusionary most of the time. I'm really not attacking individuals, but generally, I don't hear this emphasized, really talked about, really understood in hacking, maker, and tech spaces. Not at all to the extent that I would do it and I think is important. Yeah, I have a lot of people argue with me when I just bring this up in casual conversation, so it's part of why I'm up here. Okay, and that means it's not getting credit or respect in those spaces, which maybe it doesn't need that. We listen to each other and we have created our own cottage industry, so like maybe we don't need that, but there is a massive cultural and financial power imbalance because tech space has money and connections. And so I think this really matters. And also it's the two worlds that I have my feet in, and I'm like, no, 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 not two worlds. I really hate having to shapeshift here. You know, it's exhausting. So, I will talk a little less now. Some stuff that I make. That guillotine, not to brag, but I now sell laser cutting files, usually not physical stuff, despite this shenanigans I've got going on here. I sell laser cutting files online for other people to cut things from. And this file, the guillotine, is my most popular file of all time. And if you look up guillotine earrings, a whole lot of what you see online anywhere is my design. I made that in 2020. That was the entire goal. I haven't made much money. I don't care. It's incredible. Thanks. Okay, some more. I really love laser cutting. It's my favorite tool. It's also why when you conflate laser cutters and 3D printers, I'm like, absolutely not. Laser cutters are better. This is just a bit of what I could grab from the scene I've been talking about this whole time. There are listings from Etsy. There are shots, photos from the acrylic group that I showed you the name of. This was so easy for me to find. It was just kind of off the top of my head. This is the intricacy I'm talking about in this video. So I'm going to take a second for us to watch that. This is considered standard when you first get into this. When I started manufacturing PCBs, art PCBs recently, it was such a relief. Yeah. The intricacy of circuitry is nothing to this.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
I mean, this is so detail-oriented and fairly complex, and the hand manufacturing and all the work it takes is not only equivalent, but I don't do this anymore. I find manufacturing circuitry and PCBs to be less work.
Okay, all right.
At my level.
I thought you were saying that you were doing that somehow on your laser cutter, and I'm like, wait, what?
No, that's a different talk.
Tell me more.
Yeah, no. Okay. I know that people also want some of my knowledge about lasers. So, yeah. You can modify your laser, even hobby lasers that are plug and play and not meant for modifying. At least with the fumage, they're in this cottage industry of supplies meant for hobby laser cutting. You can now easily buy an inline fan. So in your laser, they've put a monstrous computer fan that sounds like a jet engine. That's why they sound terrible. Take it out, put an inline fan into your ducting, It has higher PSI, it will create a stronger vacuum, and it will make it silent because you can put it outside of your window. Stick a carbon filter at the bottom of that, which comes from weed growing industry, and they have really nice ones. And you just tape it all together, and then you have very low fumes. You can't have no fumes, but if you cut a lot of acrylic and it's the smellier acrylic, you can swap between laser cutting acrylic and laser cutting wood, and then back to acrylic. People tend to prefer the smell of laser cutting wood because it smells like campfire. So that's just a way, if you're doing this in a cramped apartment, which you can now do, these are mods that help you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is that okay? For the first one, I have the original Glowforge.
Yeah.
Can I do that on the original? Can I take
The
that
question
fan
is,
out?
can you do this putting a different fan in on an original Glowforge, which is what I meant about can you mod a laser that's not meant to be modded? Yes. 100% you can get in there and unscrew the fan in the laser.
Putting the fan into the ducting itself.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Am I at time, or are you just watching me? You're lurking? Cool. Oh, yeah, okay. When you start looking up laser cutting, the internet will tell you that you can't laser cut a lot of stuff, and they will make it sound very, very scary. And there is a list from some makerspace from a long time ago that says, do not cut these things, and it has a whole spreadsheet, and it looks very official. So, okay, what really matters here to a lot of people is, am I going to kill myself or hurt anything? And plastics are really scary. I've been through a lot with this, and I want to push in a different direction a bit. Be safe as to your own standards. But the only thing you absolutely cannot laser cut is vinyl. It will off-gas polyvinyl chloride that is deeply poisonous to humans. Never cut vinyl on your laser cutter. But you can cut yogurt lids and CDs and other very weird things, and it will smell a little bad, but if you put a really nice fan in your laser, then, you can get through experimenting, and nobody else will tell you that. And then mirrors. If you are worried about laser cutting mirrors, because there's a lot of mirrored acrylic that I love, it's not a problem and it's not dangerous. Unless it's a first surface mirror. Most mirrors that you see are second surface, which means that the reflective part is on the back of the mirror. A first surface, it's on the front. You can tell by putting your finger on the mirror, and if your finger doesn't touch itself by a small gap, it's a second surface mirror. It's safe. And if you touch your own finger on the surface where it's like pressing up against your own finger, that's a first surface. That has a chance of your beam bouncing in a laser. That nearly never happens, but with hobby laser cutting, people are wildly creative, and so basically don't try to laser cut the disc in your motherboard, like in your, in your computer. There's a disc. Hard drive, thank you. Your hard drive disc is a first surface mirror. Okay. A few more. Laser cutting, when you first get into it, you'll just go through a curve for a long time of figuring out your settings. Glowforge forums like to call them zooms and pews, and I love that. And so zooms and pews are a whole thing, but a lot of hobby laser cutters have standard settings. But to save time on engraves, because cuts are going to go diddly, diddly, diddly and go in all directions, right? Like XY goes anywhere. And a score line, which is like a cut line but doesn't go all the way through, also going to be able to go anywhere. Those are two things you can do with a laser. The last thing, third thing you can do with a laser is engrave a whole swath of it. It does that just like an old printer that goes back and forth. And so it actually has a lines per inch that you get to set, just like a printer. And if you tell it to bring the beam up a bit, because you can set how high your beam is, which affects the cutting of your acrylic. So your beam height either automatically detects from your material or you set it. If you raise that beam height on purpose, I like to raise it twice the amount. So if I'm cutting 1/8 acrylic, I'll set the beam for a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch of acrylic, a quarter. You'll figure that out later. Point is, you diffuse the beam because when it's higher up, it casts a wider circle. That means it engraves a wider line and a more diffused line. And you can lower your LPI, your lines per inch, and up your diffusion, and it cuts your laser time in goddamn half at least and looks better. That's one of my hottest tips. And then people want to know what laser to buy. I have a Glowforge Basic from the original Kickstarter, which is freaking wild. Those seem to be as like individual lasers varying in quality. People like to shit on Glowforge. I totally get it. They're a startup. They do things that make my life a little harder. But I'm a maker. My machine is a beast. It's done me a lot of favors, and I deal with the cloud software just fine. I would buy, right now, an Omtech Polar. Omtech is an older laser company, and they're larger machines outside of the Polar, varying in quality. Their customer support varying in quality. I hear, and this changes rapidly, that right now, the Polar that they came out with is a aggressive competitor to the Glowforge specifically. It is cheaper, it is more powerful, it is faster, and it has good customer support. It is only $2,500. That's the laser I will buy next. It's also about the same size. Don't buy a diode laser. Just don't. And I don't suggest one of those multifunction heads on a machine. I really, really don't. That makes every single function less good. Okay. Question. We can move into questions. 1 second, because we are now. Mwah. Questions. Wattage recommendation on a first laser. So if you're looking for a hobby laser like I'm talking about, then when they say instead of 35 watts you're going to get 40 or 45, it does not fucking matter. Don't let them upsell you. I personally think that it doesn't matter until you get to 100 watts, which is when you can start cutting metal, like thin metal, and that difference of not being able to cut metal and being able to cut it matters to some people. Otherwise, under 100 watts, fairly analogous. You want to, depending on what you want to do, maybe look it up, but doesn't matter as much as they make it sound like. That is what I should add to that. Don't go under 35. I'm so sorry. I'm catching up to diode lasers being the new hot shit, because that wasn't the case in my day. And now everybody wants to buy these 10-watt diode lasers. That wattage you're talking about is a diode laser. And sometimes they won't make it clear if it's a diode or a CO2 laser. You need to find that spec. If it's CO2, it's good. If it's diode, it's bad. And diode will be low wattage. And they'll try to make it sound like a CO2. It's not. Any other questions? Or are we at time? Lightburn is very good. If you see Lightburn, totally use it. And I can answer more later. Yeah. Thank you.